I immediately figured out the case, and none of the other Harvard Business School students did. And I was this little peon, and I wasn't allowed to raise my hand. I was like sitting on my hands because I wanted to raise my hand and give the answer because I knew the answer. And so I was like, okay, I got to come here. This is the way I want to learn, studying real businesses. Harvard Business School is all case study.
The best way I can introduce the sharply dressed gentleman across the screen from me is by saying that if some disaster or catastrophe befell my area, he's the guy I would most want in my neighborhood. When the going gets tough, Whitney Tilson gets going. He is the CEO of Empire Financial Research, an investment research firm. He's a former hedge fund manager. He is an accomplished mountaineer, a tennis player, a runner, and a very philanthropical guy, helping charter schools, COVID, Ukraine, all sorts of causes. A very impressive guy, and an author, by the way. His most recent book is The Art of Playing Defense, which my teenage son mostly sat through my reading of without complaint, which is really saying something. So, Whitney, welcome. And by the way, happy belated 30th anniversary.
Thank you. Just a few days ago, my wife and I celebrated. We've been together 33 years since Bill Ackman and I crashed the Harvard Law School orientation booze cruise at Boston Harbor, and she recognized him from growing up in the neighboring town. And I joke with her, she married the wrong hedgie.
I'm sure she's happy, though. Lightning round first, just to get to know you for people who don't know you yet. Just very quick, quick thoughts. Approximate amount of money you've helped raise for Ukraine.
$17 million, and I'm still out there probably raising a couple $100,000 a month, and from my friends and people who connect with me, because I've been to Ukraine twice this year, and I can put every penny to work in a matter of days with no overhead costs or anything, and exactly where the donor wants. The donor wants to help frontline units, with drones or vehicles and things that help the Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield. I can do that. If they don't want to do anything, military related and want to do humanitarian stuff, we're providing generators to provide power to newly liberated towns, ambulances, and that kind of thing. So I'm a full service Ukraine philanthropist.
Stop shop, yeah. And it
yeah.
comes with pictures and you do a lot of explanation.
Yes, and by the way, I always deliver my donors photographs and videos from the grateful Ukrainians who receive whatever it is we buy with their donations.
All right, so back to the lightning round. Approximate number of emails you reply to in a given day.
Oh, goodness. Well, I might reply to 100, but I have more than 20 different email lists. My largest is through my business, Empire Financial Research, which anyone can sign up for just at empirefinancialresearch.com. I put out a free investing daily that goes out to about 125,000 people, but then separately, I've set up email lists for any and all topics that interest me, ranging from Ukraine is one, Africa is another, to my hobbies like skiing and tennis, to pictures of my kids. I had a big one during the pandemic for COVID, where I was following the pandemic. So Tesla and Elon Musk have always fascinated me, so I've got one for those. And those email lists range from 500 to 5 to 10,000 people on them.
Next summit on your mountaineering list?
Ooh, that's a good question. I just finished climbing Mount Shuksan, which is up on the Canadian border in a national park I never even knew existed in northern state of Washington, 3-4 hours north of Seattle. Called Northern Cascades National Park, and that's it's not like when I climbed the nose of El Cap or the Matterhorn, or my namesake Mount Whitney, the tallest mountain in the continental U.S. I haven't yet planned next year the Grand Teton, or maybe what's called the Teton Traverse, where you hit a bunch of peaks that makes it a lot more grueling than just climbing the Grand. I don't know. My guide's always trying to talk me into doing Everest with him, but so many other people are doing it. It's just a miserable slog. I might do Rainier someday.
I worry about the brain damage of high altitude mountaineering. I mean, there have been finger tapping studies show that people who do it regularly tap their finger more slowly. They don't want to call it brain damage; they call
Yeah,
it brain
well, I have
changes,
I
right?
have not done much high altitude at all. The highest mountain I've ever been on was Cotopaxi down in Ecuador
Hmm. Around
a year
20,000
ago
feet, something.
December, and was that's 19.5.
Got it.
I actually lied. I was supposed to be climbing Kilimanjaro, which I actually climbed back in 1992 when I was backpacking through Africa between college and business school. And I had a friend and his one or two sons were going to climb it with me, but then they had to reschedule. But we're talking about going back in May, and the four of us climbing it. It would be the second time for me. So Kilimanjaro is 19.2, but it's not really. I don't. I mean, yes, it's technically mountaineering and all, but there's no ice climbing. You don't need ropes.
Got it.
It's just high altitude hiking mainly.
Yep. Interesting. One last question for lightning round. If you had not gone into investing, what would be your next career choice?
Well, in college, I majored in international relations. My parents met and married in the Peace Corps. I grew up, spent half my childhood in Tanzania and Nicaragua. And my senior year of college, I actually spent a semester in 1988 working at the U.S. Embassy as an intern in Santiago, Chile, during a very tumultuous time where the dictator there, Pinochet, had called for a plebiscite, and the voters voted him out basically, and it was unclear whether the dictator would agree with the will of the voters. You know, what self-respecting dictator ever
Agrees with
holds
voters,
a
man.
fair election, much
Defeats the
less
purpose of being a
respects the
dictator, right?
outcome?
Yeah.
So I actually took the Foreign Service exam, so I thought about a career in foreign service. And then, but I was super interested in business all through college, and ran a couple businesses, sold advertising for Let's Go Travel Guides back in the day, and I actually sat in on a Harvard Business School class, I think my sophomore year undergrad. And I remember thinking, this is incredible. I still remember the case that they taught that day. It was an old bargain basement retailer called Consumers Distributors, and I knew all about it because my parents are bargain hunters, coupon clippers, and we had shopped there. And so I immediately figured out the case, and none of the other Harvard Business School students did. And I was this little peon, and I wasn't allowed to raise my hand. I was like sitting on my hands because I wanted to raise my hand and give the answer because I knew the answer. And so I was like, okay, I got to come here. This is the way I want to learn, studying real businesses. Harvard Business School is all case study. And so, that's the direction I ended up in.
There's nothing like connecting with an actual company that you know to pull you into something, even just as an investor.
Yep.
Can't beat that. So first, investing question. You've talked a lot in your emails about these new GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic and some of the others that are helping people lose weight very massively. Peter Attia has said they're great. That you do lose muscle mass also, but if you're seriously obese, that's a pretty darn good deal, a worthwhile trade-off. Someone, maybe it was Scott Galloway, I saw it in your data, said this could affect. Obesity is expensive. And it costs as much as 6 to 8% of the U.S. GDP by some estimates, which is humongous. GDP is 26 trillion, so we're talking maybe $3 trillion dollars, if that's accurate, which is like a couple of Microsofts by market cap. And United Airlines says it could save $80 million dollars a year on fuel if each person just lost 10 pounds. The question is, this is getting a lot of buzz. And I've seen a lot of articles talking about, hey, it's going to change the investing landscape. People are going to buy new clothes. They're not going to eat much junk food. How investable, though, is this right now? Is it a real thing? Is that $3 trillion going to be real, or is it too diffuse to really be actionable to the average person?
Yeah. Well, I was very early in picking up on this because a number of my friends, I live on the Upper East Side of New York, and of course these have been very expensive drugs. A lot of insurance plans don't cover them, so basically only rich people have been able to take them. I live in the wealthiest census tract in the United States, and I know a lot of people, and so not surprisingly, I picked up on this, and the results were just astounding. A good friend of mine lives a block from me. Has lost 90 pounds in the last 15 months. Every
Wow.
single person I know who has taken these drugs, and by the way, Wegovy and Ozempic, particularly Ozempic, sort of has the name that everybody knows about, but basically all of my friends have ended up on the Lilly drug called Mounjaro. which is has fewer side effects. Mostly intestinal disturbances are the main side effects. And you lose a lot more weight. So many of them started out like on Ozempic and Wegovy, didn't like the side effects, but they tolerated it because they had lost 20 pounds. And then they switched to Mounjaro, lost another 20 pounds, and all the side effects went away. So Mounjaro is the drug all my friends are on. And look at Lilly's stock price. It's just been astounding. So that's certainly one way to play it, though. The stock has had such a huge run. I'm not recommending it currently in any of our newsletters, but I sure wish I'd been pounding the table on it a year ago. Every single person I know on these drugs loses a very steady 1 to 2 pounds a week, and they actually lose a proportion of fat and muscle similar to if they lost weight any other way, through normal exercise and dieting. In fact, all the drugs really do is it just suppresses appetite, so they don't really have to change their diet. They just find they're not as hungry, they don't have the cravings. And one of my friend who's lost 90 pounds said, even when I wasn't eating, my brain was always churning, and he said the noise in my mind is gone. It's pretty astounding. Scott Galloway cited that the average person on one of these drugs consumes 62% less alcohol. So it appears to be like an anti-addiction drug. It wouldn't surprise me, though I haven't seen any data, but they're doing studies. Does it result in people using less tobacco, smoking less, for example? So these have just been miraculous drugs, and so I think they're expensive. Two, we don't know, in 10 years, in 20 years, maybe everybody's taking these drugs gets cancer or something like that. So you can't eliminate the possibility of some bad long-term effects. But that said, the early indications are very promising. And here's what I can tell you is, look, if you're 10 pounds, 20 pounds overweight, like I know some rich people are taking these drugs as vanity things, and I don't think the risk reward makes sense for someone who's 10 or 20 pounds overweight. For someone who's 30, 40, 50 pounds who crosses from overweight into the obesity category, I think the risk reward is a no-brainer, because I can tell you with 100% certainty that if you go through the rest of your life carrying an extra 40 pounds or more, your odds of dying 10 years younger, of basically every human ailment you can think of, is your odds of it skyrocket if you are obese or significantly overweight. So I've actually created one of my 20 email lists is now focusing just on these weight loss drugs. I have 4 experts, doctors and scientists who have real expertise, and so my readers send me questions and I forward them to my doctors, and then I send out the replies to keep people informed about this. From an investing perspective, other than sort of going long Lilly and Novo Nordisk that make the 3 drugs I've mentioned, a bunch of other companies are racing to develop drugs. Amgen is one I've heard about. It's mostly, though, is stocks you want to avoid. I'd be very cautious owning any liquor companies when millions and millions of people, and probably people who are consuming more than their fair share of alcohol, all of a sudden start consuming 62% less alcohol. So I think the companies, a PepsiCo and a Coke, that are particularly PepsiCo because they've got the big snack food division, very
It's mostly
unhealthy
a snack
snacks, the
company,
Doritos and whatever. My friends who are on this drug report consuming a lot less of the sort of the garbage foods, the sugary and salty foods, all the eating between meals. Like 50 years ago, the average American ate 3 times a day. Today, the average American eats 6 times a day. It's like constant, and it's partly because the food companies and the fast food companies have all made all this yummy, salty, sugary food that's been chemically engineered to be super addictive and trigger your brain to just eat and eat and eat and to binge on it and eat between meals and all of that. And these drugs appear to suppress that. So So those are the kind of stocks where, I that's what Scott Galloway is talking about. And I mean, he interestingly talked about companies that make knee and hip replacements, which of course, if
Won't be
people
as
stop
necessary.
being
Yeah.
obese, that takes, I mean, I can imagine, I mean, I'm 56 years old, about to turn 57, and already, I've got plantar fasciitis in my left heel or whatever, and I'm a fit, trim guy. If you forced me to carry a 50-pound weight vest around me 24/7, I can't imagine how quickly my hips, my knees would be breaking, and my whole body would be breaking down. So think of all the hospitals and all the medical device makers. So yeah, I think you have to think broadly. The Galloway referred to it as the obesity industry. That in his mind, he says it ranges in size from 170 billion to 1.7 trillion, depending on how you want to count it. All the
Got it.
associated healthcare costs, all the food companies, et cetera. That's where he starts to get to numbers that look to be a mid to high single-digit percentage of GDP that could be affected by these drugs.
It's amazing. My former doctor, Mark Hyman, said we eat 10,000 more times sugar than prehistoric man did.
Yeah.
The American diet is highly perverted compared to the natural. So people say there's no magic pill for weight loss, but now there almost is, or a magic injection, I should say. Next question, a little darker topic, unfortunately. Obviously, as we're recording this, Israel is at war with Hamas, a very unfortunate situation from many perspectives. Bloomberg Economics says that if Iran jumps into this war, either by supporting Lebanon or Syria, where they've got some kind of militias, or just directly, which would be even worse, we could see a ding in global GDP growth from almost 3%, bring it down to 1.7%. Geopolitics, very hard to predict, right? It's the decisions of a few people, and they could change on a dime. Do you think investors should be doing anything differently or not?
The single word answer is no. If you look at, imagine 16, 17 months ago when Russia, supposedly at the time, was the second most powerful military in the world. Now we've discovered they're not even they're now, as the joke goes, the second most powerful military in Ukraine. Um, so a country of 144 million people invaded a country of 44 million people that has turned into the largest land war since World War II. And imagine if you'd gotten spooked out of the markets at that point, and that would have been a big mistake. Now you have a country with a population of 8.5 million. It's the population of New York City. Attacking Gaza Strip, which has a population of a few million. And so it's horrifying what's happening over there. And I think if Israel and Iran get in a direct war with one another, and Israel is sending fighter jets bombing Tehran, etc., that probably spikes world oil prices, and that could sort of be a shock to the system. I don't think that's likely. Neither Israel nor Iran want war with each other. Israel has its hands completely full eradicating Hamas from Gaza. That is going to be a very difficult lift for them. And Iran knows Israel has the capacity, not to mention, ultimately, not that Israel would ever use them, but Israel is a nuclear power by all, not publicly acknowledged, but by all accounts. So Iran doesn't want that either. Iran is just happy to harass and bleed Israel through its proxies, Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Hezbollah in Lebanon, etc. Like a lot of things that are sort of in the headlines that are dramatic and can spook investors out, I think you just have to focus on what I see is I think we've beaten inflation. Wage growth is strong. The American consumers, which accounts for 70% of our GDP, are actually in a very strong position, have good balance sheets, as does corporate America. And the economy has been really quite resilient. I think the Fed is done raising. I'm not pounding the table. I don't really see a melt up. But nor do I see a meltdown, which has sort of been the popular position, certainly in the hedge fund community this year, and they've been wrong. And I was pounding the table at the end of last year after a big down year. I thought there were lots of opportunities, especially in the most beaten down stocks. The big cap tech stocks I was pounding the table on. Meta was my absolute favorite. It's more than tripled since the bottom just about a year ago. So mostly I think investors are well served to tune out the noise and the often horrifying headlines, and just own good companies or own index funds, and don't get shaken out by the headlines.
I remember after 9/11, or during 9/11, I was a young analyst at a hedge fund, and I was in charge of drafting some letter to assuage our investors that everything's gonna be okay. And I went back and I looked at all like the previous market cataclysms, and aside from the Great Depression, every quick drop is basically quickly recovered from. It's almost never as bad as it seems. So hopefully the same thing it would be true in this case, and we haven't even had that drop really yet. You basically answered my next question, or at least mostly answered it. Your friend Bill Ackman, who you mentioned at the top of the recording, is famously bearish on bonds right now. Thinks we're not done with inflation. Thinks that the 2% target is unrealistic, sees government bond rates rising another 50 to 75 basis points, just thinks that the economy is definitely weakening. And I noticed the equity short float, by the way, is at the 98th percentile versus the past 10 years. And my friend Vitaly Katsanelson, I think you know him as well, he's also calling for a recession. You're a different voice. You're optimistic. It sounds like you think people should keep buying, don't do anything different, if I'm not mistaken. So, A, correct me if I'm wrong, and B, what else is on your radar, Whitney?
Yeah. Well, I did talk to Bill about his prediction, and his prediction is mostly at the long end of the bond spectrum. He thinks the 30 years needs to go from the low fours to the mid fives. So it's not a dramatic call, but he's figured out a clever way to play it, with derivatives or something where he'll make $1 billion if he's right. And sure enough, the 30-year has moved up quite a bit. And so what? Market's still doing fine. So our views are not necessarily incompatible. And by the way, Bill basically runs a long only 8-stock portfolio. And so this is a little bit of a hedge for him, which makes sense since he doesn't short stocks anymore after his Herbalife experience.
Herbalife, yeah.
Losing $1 billion does tend to focus the mind. So our views aren't necessarily that incompatible. I can tell you for sure. He hasn't given me any non-public information. You can just look at his holdings. You can see he's not dumping all his stocks. So one shouldn't confuse, Bill Ackman thinking stocks are going to take a huge dive with predicting that the long bond's going to go up another percentage point.
That's great. I'm glad you clarified. Whitney, if somebody is watching this and says, this is not enough Whitney Tilson, I want more, where should they best go?
Most people want less, particularly the people on a lot of my private email lists. And by the way, anyone, I'll just put that out for your audience. And these sometimes I put it out in my Investing Daily, invite people to join, for example, my Tesla email list, my COVID email list, my Ukraine email list, my weight loss drugs email list. Believe it or not, I have an email list for my single friends, in the hopes of, helping some of my friends find, their soulmate, right? And all. So anyone who wants to join any of those email lists, you can just email my personal email address is just wtilson@empirefinancialresearch.com. Or the easiest thing to do is, in addition to that, just get on my Investing Daily go to empirefinancialresearch.com, sign up for it. And in my Investing Daily, I include, as some investing stuff, some comments on the market. But then the last item is something personal about a new country I'm traveling to. I travel about 50% of the time because I can work from anywhere, and I love to travel. So I do choose to work from just about everywhere. I'm going to Europe for the 8th time this year since February. In a week and a half, I'm going to Africa to visit with my family on a family trip in November, and then to visit my family. My parents are retired in Kenya in December. Those will be my second and third trips to Africa this year. So I travel like a maniac, and I include, my Investing Daily includes a little bit of a travel log and all. So that's the easiest way to get my opinions on a literally every weekday basis on what's going on in the markets, what areas I think are attractive and all, and get a little bit of a travel log and, comments on raising children and staying healthy. And, today's email, actually, this shirt and
Oh,
this
that's
jacket
from
I'm wearing
Rothman's. Okay.
were I wrote about. Well, I got it. A friend of mine runs the largest independent men's clothing store in New York City called Rothman's, and I went down once or twice a year. I go down to Rothman's and replace my fraying shirts and pick up some nice clothing. And it's not cheap. I buy most of my stuff at Costco, but in the business world, having a nice suit, some nice ties, nice blazer, shirt, etc., so that you make a good appearance when you're speaking publicly or going to a meeting or something like that. That's actually quite important in the business world. Appearances matter, though it sort of sounds shallow to say so. So that's the kind of stuff I throw in my at the end of my daily as well.
I got this shirt for maybe $15 at Joseph, somewhere during the height of COVID.
Yeah.
I bought like 10 of them, but maybe I'm going to go to Rothman's next time up in New York City. Whitney Tilson, you've been very generous with your time. I know you're going to go to Las Vegas shortly, so have a great trip there and happy anniversary one more time. Thanks again, and thanks to you guys, as always, for watching at home.
My pleasure.